Me to turn on the machine. It's 7 o'clock, time for our regularly scheduled meeting. Mike, will you call the roll, please?
Collier-Wise.
Here.
Helwig.
Here.
Holland. Here. Humphrey.
Here.
Price.
Here.
Sorensen.
Here.
Ward. Here. Wilson. Here. Mayor Powell.
Here. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3 are minutes for June 17th special meeting and June 17th joint meeting with the county commissioners, and then June 17th regular meeting.
Second.
A motion and to approve all 3 sets of minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Adoption of the agenda. John or Mike, do you know of any changes to the agenda? No. Okay.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the agenda as printed. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Under visitors to be heard, addressing the council. Persons addressing the council shall use the microphone at the podium. Please raise your hand to be recognized. Go to the podium and state your name and address. For items that are not on the agenda, members of the public may speak one time under visitors to be heard on any topic not on the agenda. Remarks are limited to 5 minutes and no decision will be made at this time. For agenda items, public testimony will be taken at the beginning of each agenda item after the subject has been announced by the mayor and explained by staff. Any citizen who wishes may speak one time for 5 minutes on each agenda item. Public testimony will then be closed and the topic will be given to the governing body for possible action. At this point, only city council members and staff may discuss the current agenda item unless a council member moves to allow another person to speak and there is unanimous consent from the council. Questions from council members, however, may be directed to staff or a member of the public through the presiding officer at any time. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on a topic that is not on the agenda? Let's do Paul first, please.
Paul Hasse, a Vermillion resident. I have a suggestion I'd like the city council to think about.
Here's the hospital. So would this be?
Okay,
Oh, so if you flip it around, okay. I got it, if you don't mind. Okay.
okay, up by Prentice Park by the band shell.
Do you want to put that so that the public can see it?
Where does it go, right here? Yep, okay.
Thank you.
By the band shell, there's a step curb and no sidewalk painted that goes across the street to Walker. My suggestion is a curb cut at Walker and Main, a painted crosswalk, a curb cut there by the band shell, and a sidewalk to the pool.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that has a topic not on the agenda that they'd like to bring forward? Anyone on the council? Anything not on the agenda? Okay. Then we'll move on to public hearings. Item A, a special daily malt beverage and wine license for Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll on or about September 6 and 7, 2019 on Main Street between Washington and Court Street, Rodigan Platz, Market Street from Main to Bloomingdale Street, Austin Street from Main to Kidder, Kidder Street from Austin to half block east of Market, Court Street from Main to half block south, public parking lot at Market and Kidder, private parking lot at Market and Kidder, and Prospect from Main Street to National Street, and to include any other streets closed for the events. And Mike, please.
The Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll Incorporated has submitted an application for their special daily malt beverage and wine license for the Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll event on September 6th and 7th, 2019 on the streets that were stated. The notice of public hearing is included in the packet. As the event will be held on city streets and city property, ordinance allows the city to include such conditions and restrictions as the governing body may deem appropriate and consistent with state law. The street closure request will be under new business later on the agenda, and the request to exceed noise levels follows this item on the agenda. The Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll is requesting to sell beer and wine on the city streets. The release and indemnification releasing the city from liability for the event is included as part of the street closing request, and the certificate of insurance naming the city of Vermillion as an additional insured, including liquor liability, has been received. The police chief's memo is attached. City staff is not aware of any problems with previous special licenses granted to Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll. The police chief recommends the following parameters be established for the event. Staff would recommend the city council consider attaching the following conditions: that state law provides if an organization conducts a street dance in conjunction with the special event, the organization shall provide qualified security personnel as deemed necessary by the governing body which issued the license to maintain order during the street dance. In the past years, the organization has reimbursed the city for police department wages to monitor the dance. Staff proposed the organization again reimburse the police department for officers assigned to the event, limited to the overtime wages, reimbursement to $750 or actual cost, whichever is lower. In 2018, the overtime costs were $743. The alcohol purchase area should be controlled as in previous years with physical barriers at Main and Prospect, Main and High, Main and Kidder. At these barriers, ages will be verified and customers 21 and over will be given bracelets. During the hours of the car show on Saturday, open consumption of alcohol will be allowed outside the purchase area along Main Street between Washington Street and Church Street with clear signage at each egress from the area advising that no alcohol beyond this point. During the course of the events, the area used by vendors to prepare food and stage the People's Choice event will include Austin between Main and Kidder, Main between Austin and Prospect, Kidder from Austin to the alley between Court and Market Street, Market between Main and Kidder, and Market between Main and Bloomingdale Street, the public parking lots on the southeast corner of Market and Kidder, and the private parking lot on the southeast corner of Market and Kidder Street. Will allow open containers of alcohol to will be allowed with signage at each egress from the area advising that no alcohol beyond this point. On Friday evening, the area on Main Street between Market and Court Street will allow open consumption of alcohol for the cornhole tournament with clear signage at each egress from the area advising no alcohol beyond this point. The city has received the $20 per day fee and $15 advertising. Administration recommend approval of the special daily malt beverage and wine license requested contingent that the city council is comfortable with the applicant holding the license, can properly distribute malt beverages and regulate the event as outlined by the police chief.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this topic at this point? Council? A motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for the great job you guys do. Item B, a special permit to exceed permissible sound levels by no more than 50% for Ribs, Rods, Rock and Roll Incorporated on or about September 6 and 7, 2019 from 5 p.m. to midnight on Main Street between High and Prospect Streets. And again, Mike.
The Ribs Rods and Rock and Roll Incorporated has applied for that special permit to exceed allowable noise levels for several bands and street dance on 2 consecutive nights. The first is on Friday, September 6th between 5 p.m. and lasting until midnight. The second will be on Saturday, September 7th between 5 p.m. lasting until midnight. The request, diagram, and notice of hearing are included in the packet. The application and map indicate the stage and sound system will be on the Rodigan plots facing to the east. City Council need to determine at the meeting if this is a suitable location with appropriate facilities during an allowable time, and if the applicant can demonstrate the public benefit for the event. The committee has paid the $25 fee for the permit, and administration recommend approval of the special permit unless information is presented at the public hearing indicating that there was a problem relating to noise.
Again, this is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this at this time? Council?
Move approval?
Motion and a second to approve the special permit. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. In old business, we have one item, second reading of ordinance 1402, amending Title 15, Land Usage to add to Chapter 157, Small Cell Facility Regulations, providing provisions for small cell wireless communication facilities. And John, please.
Thank you. As you know from past council meetings as well as the discussion at the last council meeting, this is an item that our community as well as the municipal league has been working on over the last year. As this year began, we received a draft of a model ordinance that a couple of the providers in the area, Verizon, AT&T, and others had worked with the municipal league to develop a model ordinance so the respective communities in the state would have something to use as a framework to begin discussions. And I won't reiterate all the things in the ordinance, but basically I just kind of point out a few things. While it is a very long ordinance, about 15 pages, it does lay out a lot of the language with regard to how small cells would be deployed in our community. Be on utility poles, buildings, marquee type signs, or parking lot lights. The city now, if this is adopted, would need to develop an extensive application to meet the items that are part of this ordinance. This ordinance would include a lot of different, or the application through the ordinance would include a lot of different things, photo simulations, radio frequency emissions compliance, demonstration that the pole or the support structure can handle that equipment, a site plan, aesthetic compliance summary, statement of purpose, just a number of things that would help with this process in terms of citing these appropriately in our community. I would note that most of these are done administratively. There is an appeals process where they could go to the Planning Commission and or the City Council. Certainly the FCC has kind of weighed in and they've established, must have a basketball emphasis in the FCC, a shot clock that has to be utilized if we are, in terms of how quickly we need to react to these and when those shot clocks come into play and different things that may impact them. So without going back through the whole thing, I would just note that this ordinance before you tonight, 1402, is updated. As you may recall at your last meeting, we brought the ordinance to you that Utilities Committee had reviewed and made a recommendation on, and you had looked at a couple different times. During that discussion that evening, some of the Verizon representatives who were present, we had some discussion about one of the sections in propagation maps, and those were directed by council to be removed from that ordinance, and you approved it accordingly, and that language has since been stricken. I would say that the other little changes to it are cleanup. In terms of, we had one that was mislabeled A, B, C instead of 1, 2, 3. We cleaned up some of those little things, but it is the same ordinance that you saw last time with the corrections that you adopted at that meeting. I would note in there, it does say in the ordinance that there would be fees for the permit as well as for the use of the right-of-way, and as is typical, those are adopted, the language says those will be adopted by resolution, which is a little bit later on your agenda this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions or to go through it more thoroughly. We do have a couple of Verizon representatives here to add additional comments. If you have any questions. I would also note that we were contacted by AT&T. They requested a copy of the ordinance. They were provided one, and they were fine with the ordinance. They concurred with the recommendation of the Verizon representatives at the last meeting to strike the full color signal propagation map. So that was the synopsis of their comments.
Thank you, John. Any comments from the audience?
Good evening, Council. My name is Jeff Armour from Omaha with Verizon, and Sarah Muley, my counterpart. We won't take as much time as we did last time, of course, but I just want to say thank you for your engagement on this issue and continue tweaking that we did last time to make it even better for deployment and for the community as far as an ordinance goes. So we look forward to working with you on that deployment and also for our permitting process with you to do that.
To piggyback off of Jeff's comment, I just want to personally thank John for his work on this. He's been very diligent and great to work with through the whole process. So we're looking forward to the partnership going forward. And in that similar vein, we look forward to establishing and also continuing throughout the partnership sentiment when it comes to crafting what that permitting process will actually look like. So we want you guys to know that we are a continued resource for you going forward. So
Thank you.
And as far as that permitting process, we're happy to provide a lot of those things that John already said, and we comply with all FCC emission standards, requirements, and everything that we're supposed to do, we do, and provide and show that to you. So we'll look forward to working with you in the future on small cells.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else in the audience wish to comment on this?
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like this ordinance is paving the way for the next generation of electromagnetic radiation from 4G to 5G, fifth generation. These radiation waves are dangerous to people. They go right through your body. They're harmful to young people when their bodies are developing. The city should invite an expert to come in here and talk to you people about the health effects. Now, we've had radiation around for a long time. You know, you go to AM and FM radio, and you go up the line to microwaves, infrared, visible light can cause skin cancer, can burn your brain. And you go faster, X-rays. The X-ray technicians wear lead vests to protect themselves. Then you get into the gamma rays. And the next generation of these waves, they go through everything. Sure, there's a paint. You can paint the walls of your house to stop the radiation from coming in. You can put on screens on your windows to stop the radiation. Are we going to have to do that? I don't want one of these mini towers near my house. If there's 30 of them in Vermillion, I don't want one around my neighborhood. You know, you turn off your wireless Wi-Fi at night, and you don't carry your cell phone up here by your heart because of the radiation. There's a lot of things that people need to do to protect themselves. But I want to go on record as a suggestion that the city bring in an expert and then talk to you people about fifth generation. Anything else?
Thank you, Paul. Anyone else in the audience? Turn it to the council for deliberation. Tom?
Two questions, and I think I can point out, if memory serves, from early on, before the small cell, we were talking about the other cell, I believe we started to discuss some of the purported health issues on this kind of stuff. So I think we've covered it, but you might want to reiterate some of that. My main question is simply legally, who decides whether any of the changes that we made from last time to the second reading were simply minor and not substantive? Is that a legal opinion or just a staff opinion, or are we reassured that?
As I understand, last time we asked the council, our legal counsel, if minor changes were okay, and he agreed that they were.
So the city attorneys have reviewed this then? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? We have a motion for approval, and we have a second. Yeah, it's a roll call vote. Thank you, everybody, for reminding me. Okay. south side of Bauer Street for the Vermillion Chamber of Commerce and Development Company. John, please.
Thank you. This is pretty much the same event as you have seen for many years. The only difference that we do have is that it has moved slightly south with the area for the discharging of the fireworks has moved slightly south due to some of the construction, such as the National Music Museum's Preservation Center and some other things. So it's slightly south, as the mayor mentioned in reading it. It is on the discharge will be in the field between what is the VTC Biotest Navigant and Stagecoach storage units. That's where the discharge will take place. The event, as you noted, is this Thursday, July 4th at 10 p.m. In the event of rain, the application does provide that it would be the next day, Friday, July 5th at 10 p.m. We'd recommend approval.
And I might just note that the city's contribution provides $3,500 from BBB sales to support this. Is there any comment or question? Motion and a second to approve the fireworks display permit. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Item B is a resolution establishing fees for small cell facility permits and recurring fees for small cells located in the right-of-way. John, please.
Thank you. With the adoption of Ordinance 1402, as I mentioned a few moments ago, it's typical that in our ordinances we use language that says resolution, fees set by resolution is the language in there. So this is your opportunity to set those fees. Basically, when the FCC was providing guidance on it, they established that there's two different categories where you can establish a fee. One is your permit application fee, and the second one is basically an annual fee for each small cell that is located within the community. The maximum application fee, and it seems to be pretty common around this part of the country, is $100 per site, with a maximum for each additional one of $100, or the way ours is written, you could put 5 on an application up to $500. That one has been a little bit easier to work through. That was pretty much established, if you will, through a lot of the FCC guidance. The second part of it had to do with the annual fee per small cell device in the right-of-way. And I would say the FCC established a maximum of $270 per year on that. And that's where I appreciate Verizon has given us some education as to kind of where that came from. It came out of the state of Texas and in some of the language there. What seems to be a more common range in our part of the country is about $100 to $150 per year. In our discussions with Verizon, we had suggested $150, and they didn't kick me out of the room, I guess. So I think that they were accepting of that as the fee for each device on a calendar year basis. So the resolution that is attached or included in your packet would include those two fees, a permit application of $100 and the usage fee of $150.
Thank you, John. Anyone in the audience want to comment on this one? Turn to the council. Oh, Rich.
A couple of things, I guess, to John. First of all, the permits, at $100 a permit, and it's a maximum of 5 per permit, but there's no discount, right? If you did 100 at a time, they'd still be $100 each. So why we limit it to 5 on a permit? Seems cumbersome. And just listing locations and everything else would be the same.
I would not disagree with you, council member. It seemed to be, and these two folks have looked at a lot more of these than I have, that seemed to be the magic number that they kind of worked with, was about 5 per application. And so that's kind of the model, if you will, that we followed. It's basically $100 per permit application.
And that doesn't change?
No.
Whether it's 1 or 5 or...
Right.
It's okay if it depends on what you do for permit. If it simply says where it is and this is $100, it's fine. But if it's complex to fill each one, I don't see the point of having 5 or, say, have 30, it would be 6 different applications.
And as you saw in the ordinance, I think it'll be a complex application more than, if you will, name and address, so to speak, due to the guidance that was provided by FCC and the things that communities would look at, the model ordinance that had the discussion about what might be taken into consideration, what may not be taken into consideration. In terms of that, I don't envision this being a short application, that, probably 2 pages of the documentation and the questions, and then what they submit as the documentation for it. So yeah, it's interesting from a local government perspective, the amount of FCC input we had as to how what I would consider a largely local issue should be handled and dealt with. At the same time, the industry reps in the room could say that Verizon exists in more than one place in this country than Vermillion, South Dakota. And so some consistency across the nation, I think, is kind of marrying those two together. So.
In the past, maybe I should ask you, you've seen applications before, isn't about 80% of the application the same no matter where, and it changes just location? And if that's the case, we should tailor the application so they can just copy it. Go ahead.
Do you want me to answer that?
Please.
Okay. And as far as what your earlier question, that's dealing with batch permits. So that's where the FCC order talks about batch permits. But not every application is the same. In fact, it's specific to each site because
Right.
we have to analyze the pole structure that we're using or the site location that we want to put a pole. So each is very specific and very detailed as to that site. So it's not just changing the name and the location. It goes into the analysis with an engineering stamp even if there's an existing pole that structurally it can handle it.
So you're saying basically it'd be hard to put 5 of them together?
That's
One
what it
permit?
envisions with that kind of batch permitting.
Okay, that's good. That's one
Thank you.
question. The next one has to do with, this is 5G and it requires a whole lot more, many more transmitters, receivers than 4G. But I'm wondering, what's our cost? Does it cost us $150 a year to have it in a pole? I mean, if we seem to be penalizing for an improvement in our communications. Because at the end of this, it's going to be a heck of a lot more than we ever had for 1 or 2 antennas in the past. Do we really, can we justify that and say it costs us $150 each to maintain a pole?
Well, I
find
think-
that hard to believe.
Go ahead.
I mean, my understanding is that some of this is sort of like a lease situation. If you were leasing a home, you wouldn't say, well, it costs me this much money a year to maintain this home, and that's all I'm going to charge you. I mean, there's a little bit of give and take that we are giving public infrastructure to a private company, and so part of that is that there is probably a little bit of investment then back in the community for that it wouldn't be a one-to-one. That's how I've viewed this,
I
at
don't
least.
expect a one-to-one, but I think, my goodness, if we talk 30 towers, what I'm leading to, and maybe he can answer this, is if we drop that, could we get more poles? Because they're not going to be encouraged to put poles out in the perimeters, out in the areas that are sparse, unless, because you're paying a fortune for 2 phones or something.
Well, did you have a question for me then?
Well, the question would be, if it were less, would we get more poles?
Yes. And to that question, the FCC, it's not a market-based rate. It's not a revenue generator. It has to be actual cost-based. So in that analysis, does it cost the city $150 per year to maintain an existing permitted pole structure? And that's where there's a formula to determine that based on your actual cost. But that's to your question. So it's not a market-based of what could we sell this to, or what could we rent this to, or what could we lease this to. It's what does the city incur as a cost. So it's a cost neutral to maintain that permit.
And to Jeff's point, the FCC guidance language speaks to 3 things: actual, direct, and reasonable. So those would be the 3 prongs you'd be looking to satisfy whether the prove-up of the costs were incurred
And we can
for the
justify-
FCC guidance.
So what John indicated is doing that analysis, different communities in the South Dakota area here have found anywhere from 100 to 150. We are okay with that range. Obviously, the less it costs us, the more we're going to be able to deploy in Vermillion. And of course, we want to stress that it is a cost-based approach that needs to be taken, but we're willing to work with the city on that.
Julia?
I just want to reiterate what Kelsey was saying, and perhaps they could put in more if it was cheaper application fee, but I can assure you that Verizon can afford $150 for each one per year. And also, they're not going to, these, as you said last time, are very expensive to put in. So they're not going to put in a ton more than what is necessary, what is appropriate for community. Furthermore, they're providing a private but also a public good, because ultimately part of the small cells, as I'm understanding it, is that it helps with that increased traffic, which helps us for our 911 calls and so on. And so I think part of this is also that it brings in that additional, even if a little bit of revenue, there are few ways that we can bring in revenue to the city. And so providing the public good in this way, but also bringing in a little bit of that lease fee for our citizens, I think is important. So whatever little bit that we can do, I think is a good thing.
According to what you
Okay.
just read, we can't say that. We can't say this is going to be used for other than the maintenance of the pole by the federal rules. If I understood what you said, there was 3 parameters. One of them was the actual cost, and I forgot the other 2. But
Actual cost and related to reasonable fees for the right-of-way. But just as a compromise, I think is how we arrived at the 150, and I know there's different sentiments, but we're okay with the 150 to move forward in deployment, and if that becomes prohibitive for different reasons, then we can re-engage the city on that level.
okay, thank you.
You will put in enough that whatever we need. Is that correct?
We are very proud of our coverage map, and we will meet the needs of our network and also look to build upon the needs of Vermillion.
Thank you. Further discussion? Motion is second to approve the resolution establishing fees. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we're going to visit with Jolly for a while. Item C, request to close Main Street from South Norbeck Street to High Street for the Dakota Days Parade scheduled for Saturday, October 5, 2019. Jolly, please.
Starting with the Dakota Days Parade, it's a staple during the USD Homecoming Week, and the parade is enjoyed not only by alumni, but current students and future Yotes. The Dakota Days is a great way for many organizations to attribute it to the community to get involved, as well as a way to get creative off the school spirit during the best week of the year. And so the Dakota Days Committee and Katie Ryan is requesting the closure of Main Street from South Norbeck Street to High Street on Saturday, October 5th, and after evaluating the map, it hasn't really changed from last year's, so it's the exact same street closure. According to the application, the Dakota Days Parade staff will plan for walking the route after the parade to pick up any remaining items on the street, and the parade will be advertised on the Equalizer, along with it will also be on the USD website, so we can find the information on the street closure on there. And so we recommend that the City Council approve the street closings of Main Street from South Norbeck to High Street for the Dakota Days Parade.
Thank you. Council? Motion is second to approve the request. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item D, a request to close Main Street between Washington and Church Street, Radigan Platz, Market Street from Main to Bloomingdale Street, from Main to half block south, and Prospect from Main Street to National Street for Ribs, Rods, Rock and Roll on September 6 to 8, 2019. And the closings might vary, the times and days might vary with different streets, again.
So for this one, I pulled out the map, if we can show it on the screen for everyone. This one's a little bit more complex. So it's instead of last year's, the only major change that we added was the green section, which will be proposed to be closed on September 6th at 1:30 p.m. until Saturday, September 7th at 5 p.m. That's just to allow the businesses in that area to serve lunch on that Friday, so that they don't have to worry about traffic in that area. But everything else is the same. There aren't any major changes besides that new street closure that is going to be set at 1:30 p.m. on Friday. This is the 15th annual Ribs, Rods, and Rock and Roll event, where there's a car show, food vendors, a beer garden, live music, kids areas, and then the KCBS sanctioned National Barbecue Contest. And the administration noted that there weren't any complaints from last year, and therefore we recommend approval of the street closures mentioned previously, as it is the exact same closure besides the new requested change of having the green section in there. So.
Thank you, Jolly. Council?
Second?
A motion and a second to approve the request. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. Item E, a request to close North Plum Street from East Cherry Street to South Dakota Highway 50 on Friday, August 23rd, 2019, from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. for USD's Move-In Day. Again, Charlie?
All right, I'll address the two move-in days simultaneously, the Plum Street closing and the Rose Street closing. So the University of South Dakota is requesting the closure of North Plum Street from East Cherry Street to Highway 50, and then the Rose Street closing is from Coyote Village to the Dakota Dome for USD's move-in day, and the events are both scheduled at the same time. They're going to be from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. on August 23rd, 2019. And the USD's move-in day gives incoming students an opportunity to not only interact with other USD students as they're helping them move in, but gives the community a sense that they're welcoming them into the community. So this is a great event for them, makes them more aware of what the town is like, as the street closure is covering two major streets for them. So as noted by the application, the police, fire, and EMS all have been notified of the street closing, and the USD Police Department will pick up any cones and/or barricades at the event's conclusion. And so therefore, we recommend that City Council approve of the temporary closing of Rose Street from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. on August 23rd, 2019, on Plum Street from East Cherry to Highway 50, and then also Rose Street from Coyote Village to the Dakota Dome.
Thank you, Jolly. I think for us, it's appropriate for us to take them one at a time. So
Okay.
let's first do the North Plum from Cherry Street to South Dakota Highway 50. A motion and a second to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed, no. Motion carries. And then we'll take the request to close Rose Street from Coyote Village to the Dakota Dome. A motion and a second to approve that as well. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to item G, a resolution establishing a surcharge fee for 2019 electric revenue refunding bonds and revising electric rates. And Mike, please. Are you going to read the whole thing, Mike? Or?
Oh, quite a bit of it.
Okay.
Sorry. In 2009, the City Council issued a little over $7 million of bonds to finance the construction of electric transmission lines, related improvements at the Spirit Mound substation and the city substation. These bonds, or the outstanding bonds that remain, were a taxable bond with the Build America option on that reimbursed 35% of the interest. The interest refund amount has been reduced to a little over 32%, and with a net interest rate of 3.3 to 4.21%. These bonds are callable starting in December 1st, 2019, with an outstanding principal of $5.4 million. In February of 2019, the City Council adopted a resolution authorizing the issuance of electric revenue refunding bonds should the interest rates be at a favorable point here in December to do that. Since that time, we've worked with Doherty and Company on gathering the information needed, and Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, was asked to rate these bonds. Why they were asked to do is in 2009, they rated our bonds. We had an A rating on them bonds to hopefully bring our interest rates down. Standard & Poor's now is asking that we have a surcharge rate resolution in place to address the 2019 issue before they will rate it. So this resolution we're proposing establishes a 2000 surcharge based on what the projected debt service is going to be on the 2019 bond. That would only be in effect if the 2009 bond was paid off, which would take the refunding bond. So if for some reason interest rates go up here before the end of the year and we don't refund, this new surcharge would not be in effect because we hadn't retired the 2009 bond. So we had our bond counsel with Dorsey and Whitney has reviewed this and determined that it meets the requirements. In the past, we've waited until bonds were, they'd got the bids and stuff on the bonds. We knew what the principal and interest was, so we could set our surcharge at 125% of what that is. They did that before we actually closed on the bond issue. Now Standard & Poor's wants it, so what I'm kind of saying is, if we do get here, maybe in late November, we might be looking at addressing this resolution again. If the interest rates are a little higher or change, we may have to adjust the surcharge fee at that time, but at least we're showing where the council's going to adopt a fee so that there's one in place if these bonds are issued. One other little thing where we were looking at that was we had a night watch flood, which was more of a security light. The old ones were based on lamp size, be it 70, 100, 250, or 400 watt. Since they've converted stuff to LED, the light department has just finished that up, and they had indicated we should look at doing that. So we did make changes in section 5126 to adjust the wattage size to the LED lamp wattage size to 40 watt, 60 watt, and 300 watt. We did not have any 250 watt bulbs anymore that were out there, so we removed that one from the charge. So in the wording here, we talk about revising electric rates. The only one we're doing is for the security lights. In reviewing the charge for them, there's less kilowatt hours used for a LED light, but the fixture itself has a higher cost of acquiring it, that the light department thought the monthly fee should remain the same. I can try to answer any questions. We'd recommend adoption of this resolution. If it is adopted, a signed copy will be sent off tomorrow to the rating agency to review that to determine if they will give a favorable rating to our refunding bond.
Thank you, Mike. Any of you have any questions of Mike on this?
Yeah, Mike, I don't know if you can answer or not, but these are the charges based on wattage for the night lights, is that right?
Yeah, that would be the size of the fixture.
Is that just because of the amount of power it used? Or
Yes.
something? Because LEDs use less power, but they're going to improve in the past too. I was wondering why they don't go by lumens or something that's going to stay constant. You know, because we want bright lights, of course, and hopefully they get cheaper and cheaper all the time.
Well, what the electric department, when we asked them about that, said this is like if you buy a current, like about a 13 or an 18 watt bulb, they say is the equivalent
Right.
of a 60 watt.
Oh, yeah,
So
I know.
This
That's
was
good.
the same thing they went and looked at, so this 40 watt bulb is the equivalent, a 40 watt LED currently they have is the equivalent of a 70 watt.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. So I guess I'll have to talk to them about it, because what we're after is a nice bright light so we can see what's going on. And the LEDs are getting brighter all the time using less power. That's wonderful. So that means if they get better LEDs, you have to change it again because they'll be using less power? Or
Yep, if we get better bulbs, they'll look to change something again. We may need to address it here, but when they start talking the looms, most people don't understand what that is. And to go look that up and try to find out what the equivalent looms are in a 100 watt bulb or a 150 watt bulb, it isn't, they assume, it's a little easier to say is equivalent to a 70 watt bulb, a 100 watt bulb, or a 400 watt bulb for the average person to understand.
Okay, thank you. Understand.
And Mike, to continue that, the fixture does cost more, but that's pretty much a one-time expense. Even if the LEDs change over a period of time, would they all fit that same fixture? You don't have to change the fixture every time you update an LED, do you? I wouldn't think so.
You shouldn't unless you do
So-
change models or the one that made that fixture isn't out with the newer, more efficient bulb, then you'd have to probably look to change fixtures.
And we hope that the savings using LEDs will just sort of help pay for those more expensive fixtures.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Council? Motion is second to approve the resolution. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item H, Vermillion Housing Authority Board appointment. Presently, there are 5 members, and they are 5-year terms rotating. And the current members and term expirations are Cindy Benzel, 2019, Joan Holter, 2020, Maria Trowbridge, 2021, Craig DeVelder, 2022, and Elizabeth Abbott, 2023. The expiring board member term was advertised on the city's website and mentioned as part of the city manager's report from previous council meetings. There was 1 application, and so I would like to appoint Cindy Benzel to continue on with this council's approval. A motion and a second to approve Cindy Benzel. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. We turn next to bid openings. Item A is fuel quotes. We're at your table this evening, and Mike, if you go through those with us.
I had 2 quotes. First from Stern Oil, an unleaded gasoline with 10% ethanol, $2.28.17 per gallon. Item 2 is unleaded gasoline regular, $2.55.19. Number 3 is number 2 diesel fuel dyed, $2.1888. Item 4 is number 2 diesel fuel clear, $2.4853. Second quotes from Brunick Service on item 1, $2.31. Item 2, $2.54. Item 3, $2.19. Item 4, $2.51. Stern was low on 1, 3, and 4. Brunick's on 2.
Council? Motion is second to approve the low bids. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, Mike. Next, we have ground storage improvement. And Shane, there he is.
Thank you. Back in 2017, staff performed an inspection on the ground storage reservoir, which is located between the library and the water treatment facility. That inspection showed the need to recoat the entire interior of the reservoir. The ceiling was in worse shape as it's still the original coating from 1971 when the structure was built. The walls and the floor were more recently coated in 1987. In January of 2019, we entered into an agreement with Banner Associates for the engineering of the project. For bids, the project was broken down into 2 parts. We had a base bid that covered the blasting and the recoating of the ceiling, while the alternate bid covered the walls and the floor to get those blasted and recoated. 7 bids were received. For every one of those did include both base bid costs and a bid alternate cost. Excuse me. We totaled the cost for both of the bids for evaluation. The totals ranged from $282,500 up to $437,000. The low bid was received from Viking Industrial Painting out of Omaha, Nebraska for the total amount of $282,500. Banner has written a letter of recommendation as well as a bid tabulation that has been attached for your guys' review. The water treatment fund may need to be revised if the work is completed in 2019. To try to get better bids, we did extend the completion date into next year, next June. So just to try to give a little bit wider window for companies. If it is completed this year, we will need to up the cost a little bit on that. The Water Department's reserve fund does have sufficient funds to cover any revisions that would need to be made. Banner, along with staff, recommends awarding both the base and the alternate bid to Viking Industrial Painting at a cost of $282,500.
Thank you, Shane. Council? Motion is second to approve the ground storage reservation improvements. Does this put a date on as far as Viking is concerned?
Does it right now? I just got to talk to them still. They're kind of open though, so I don't know if they're going to try to get it right on it or not.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Tom.
A quick question, and I'm sorry if I don't remember this, because it was a long time ago. When we have an engineering agreement like this, because that's part of the total cost of all this, you remember what we pay, in this case, Banner, to just put an agreement like this together when we run bids?
Are you talking about for the design and everything and all the specifications?
The engineering agreement for a GSR improvements project.
I believe it was $46,000.
Just under $50,000.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Next, we have city manager's report. John, please.
Thank you. Just a couple of items. We're putting together a home rule study committee. Citizens that might be interested, they're asked to complete an expression of interest form and return that to the city manager's office by noon on July 12th, and then we'll be making appointments shortly after that date. If that's not your cup of tea, we also are putting together a complete count committee for the 2020 census. If you're interested in serving on that one, please also contact City Hall and we'll get you signed up for that as well. Back on, I believe it's June 20th, the bid number 2, which is basically our downtown bid, they hosted one meeting on June 20th. They will be hosting another public meeting. They have not yet set a date for that, but we just wanted to get the word out, let people know that we are working on putting together another public meeting, and that will be advertised once we have that date determined. As was noted earlier in the agenda, this Thursday is July 4th, and city offices will be closed on that day for the holiday. If you are a Thursday curbside recycling customer, your Thursday, July 4th pickup will take place on Monday, July 8th. And then just a reminder that on Thursday, July 11th, Thursdays on the Platts starts. That's an event every Thursday through the end of August. So from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., West Main Street and Market Street, as they abut Radigan Platts, will be closed on those Thursdays for the Thursdays on the Platts events from 4 to 8 p.m.
Comments or questions for our city manager? Seeing none, we'll move on then to invoices payable. And any questions for Mike? Mike, I'd like to ask about 43, please.
This is with the city taking over annexing territory and agreeing to serve it with electric service, where we reimburse Clay Union Electric for, I think it's 25% of our rates for the power sold in that area. We've got the airport hangars, trying to think of all the, Bliss Point had some properties out there.
Is that where we made some of a swap?
No, this wouldn't have been a swap. This would have been where we actually took over the right to serve that territory.
Okay. Any other questions for Mike?
We pay them for 7 out of 11 years, so it'd be a 7-year period or less over an 11-year period.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to pay our bills. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Under consensus agenda, we have one item. Set a public hearing date of July 15, 2019 for a retail on-off sale malt beverage license and retail on-off sale wine and cider license for Aramark Educational Services, LLC at Sanford Coyote Sports Center and Dakota Dome, 1101 North Dakota Street. I didn't know you had to have a license to sell cider. Oh. Motion and second to approve the consensus agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries, Steve. Motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.